Welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, the show that gives you advice on everything travel. We explore places you've always wanted to go, as well as giving tips for traveling in those places. We'll give you advice on the best sites for travel tips, information, and discounts. Join us as we travel the world, explore cultures, and meet new people. The Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast has got you covered.
Brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Emily McDonald, and I've been gone for the past 2 weeks, but I brought back plenty more travel stories and tips. You see, I spent my time recently in Belize doing some research on women's health and spirituality, and as you can imagine, I am back feeling grateful and very ready to unpack both physically and emotionally. I'm going to tell you about Belize throughout the next few episodes, so stay tuned until the end of the show for a sneak peek, but we are going to start off our show today on an entirely other part of the world. Today I want to talk about Europe. Where to go, where not to go, what to see, what to wear, who to go with, and how to get the most out of your trip. So let's start with the basics. The way that I see it, you kind of have two options. You can go to the city or you could go to the country. Now, Europe as an entire continent can be quite intimidating in terms of planning a trip. There are 44 countries and over 800 cities, all of them providing a unique experience of their own. And so you kind of have to consider what type of experience that you want from your trip. Do you want to see art? Do you want to see science? Do you want to see nature? You really do have to do your research and kind of decide for yourself where you want to go. One of the best parts of traveling to Europe is the type of history that you just can't get in the US. If you enjoy history, there are endless monuments and historical buildings and structures and parks, all rich with stories and facts that are generations old. And if you're looking for an experience like this, I would say that I think that you should go to a city. You should also visit a city if you're looking for fashion or art or cuisine, or just if you're looking to get a general lay of the land. If you just want to take a vacation to somewhere new, traveling to a city will almost always make a good trip because you just do have so many options. Something else that is a great perk to a city is that I really feel like there is something for everyone. I have been lucky enough to do some traveling with my entire family to Europe, and as you can imagine, that is a hectic trip, but it was very fascinating and very helpful because all of our accommodations were really able to be met based on the spread that was provided to us inside of the city. Now, of course, you also have the countryside, as I mentioned before. Here, you're going to have the best views, the best access to nature, and most likely you'll be able to develop a more personal and unique experience overall. And the countryside of European countries kind of often gets looked over, I want to say. There's less glitz and glam about them, and generally less accessibility, meaning just kind of more difficult to get to. There's not really a public transport oftentimes. You have to rent a car, you have to do all these things. However, if you can plan it right, you could quite possibly have, a more amazing time having your own experience in the countryside as opposed to the city. If you want to stay outside of a city, try to find a place that has a lot of different activities. For example, Interlaken, Switzerland is an absolutely gorgeous town. It's famous for its hikes, for skiing. It has lakes and castles and really great hospitality. So visiting there gives you a chance to relax and unwind while still being very easily entertained and getting the experience that you really just can't get back home. Different parts of rural Europe obviously hold different experiences, and so, as always, like I always say, just do your research to find exactly what you like and what you want to do with your time. Timing is a huge part of planning a trip. You want to see everything you need to see, but you also don't want to waste your time or your money. Europe being in a different time zone and a pretty far flight really isn't something that you would want to do for just a weekend. I'm sure you could, but being jet lagged and only having a day or two to see a city just doesn't sound right to me. And so, you want to make sure you're staying there long enough, but kind of on the other end of that, it is expensive and can be really overwhelming if you're staying for more than a week or two. And so for this episode, I want to base most of what I'm saying off of traveling to Europe for just 1 week. And I think that this is going to be a really great way to kind of encapsulate and accurately be able to plan a trip. And a 1 week trip is something really easy to plan, and it's something very manageable. And so when we come back from the break, I'm going to tell you about some of the cities in Europe that I think would be great specifically for a week-long trip. And before we cut to the break, I just wanted to mention that we do have a Twitter page. It's GSMC_travel. And if you want to see pictures and additional tips, I would suggest following that. If you have any questions or feedback for me, or you have anything to say generally about the podcast, feel free to DM, feel free to tweet us, and we will definitely respond to you. And so when we come back from the break, we are going to talk about top cities in Europe.
Do you want to be healthier, yet you just don't know what to do? All these shows telling you this and that, but nothing seems to work. Well, listen close. Golden State Media Concepts has got something great for you. The Health and Wellness Podcast dedicated to workout trends, healthy eating habits, diet, and everything about healthy living. Join us in our banters as we help you not just live life to the fullest, but live it to the healthiest.
Is quite a difficult list to make because, like I said, there are 800 cities to choose from. I really can only do this list based on my personal opinions and the opinions that I've formed from some of the research that I've done and some of the opinions of my friends and family that I've asked. And obviously this is a difficult list to narrow down, and so I'm hoping that at least I can provide some recommendations for anyone who maybe is new to traveling to Europe and is trying to plan a trip, or at least some information that I say will maybe spark some interest. And so with no particular order in mind, I'm going to list some of my top cities. First up just has to be Rome. All of Italy is so amazing to me, and honestly, I really think if you wanted to, you could make a week-long trip just traveling through Italian cities. In fact, I recommend it. I've done it before, and it makes for a really amazing and different trip. But I am choosing Rome because I truly have never had a city blow me away as much as Rome does. Every single step you take, it feels like you are able to observe something new and something historical and something that you've never seen before. And I think that generally I could walk around Rome for an entire week without stepping foot into a building or a museum, and I feel like I will have learned a lot. Another amazing part of the city is the juxtaposition that it has of kind of this new and this old. I was talking to a friend recently, and they explained to me that at any time that a new building is going to be made, they automatically have to plan time for an archaeologist to come in because of how often pieces of history come up when they are building and digging new things. And I just think that that is a real mark to show how rich this city is with history. And there's so much that has not even been solved yet. And I think that that is a motivation to go and check out Rome. And if you need a few notable places to go to in Rome, there is, of course, the Colosseum, there's the Vatican, there's St. Peter's Basilica, the Trevi Fountain. And one of my favorite things that I saw when I was in Rome was all of the art that's there, and all of the historic art, including the statue of David, which is a 500-year-old massive sculpture of a naked man that was created by Michelangelo. And it is quite an obscure piece of art, but also very beautiful and very famous. And so that is why Rome has to be on my list of places that you should go if you have 1 week to spend in Europe. I, of course, cannot make this list without mentioning Paris. It's one of the most visited cities in the world, and it makes sense because of its breathtaking views. If you're gonna go to Paris, you do have to be prepared to learn a little bit of French because, unlike a lot of other cities in Europe, the French don't speak much English, and this means that you definitely have to do your research. But Paris just has this particular charm that you really can't get in a lot of other places. I'm planning a trip to Paris myself in March, and because I planned very far ahead, I was able to buy my tickets for $350 round trip. My Airbnb is about $20, and I am staying very close to the Eiffel Tower, and so I think that if you plan it right, Paris can actually be affordable, and it's very doable to make a trip to. And speaking of affordable options, or maybe lack thereof, another city that I have on my list is London. I'm calling London the tourist-friendly city. I think that if you've never been outside of the country and you're looking for more of a streamlined trip, something that is going to be not that stressful, easy to navigate around, I think that London would be a great option for you. However, London is very pricey. I cannot seem to go to London and spend a reasonable amount of money just based on food and transport and so on and so forth. But it is really a wonderful place to visit. It's also a really fun place to visit. So there's lots of bars and clubs and just a lot of general nightlife. And so if that's something you're interested in, I think London is a great place for you. Another city that I have fallen in love with in Europe is Amsterdam. And to me, I think that Amsterdam has maybe the most personality of any city that I've been to. It is filled with art, and it is filled with history, but to me that is the attraction to it. It's filled with so much art. Walking around the city is just very lovely to do. There's beautiful streams that flow throughout the city. There's a lot of different areas of Amsterdam as well. There's a famous red light district. There's great museums. There's a lot of freedom in Amsterdam, and so if that's something that you're interested in, I think it's a great place to go to as a young person, to kind of explore more of yourself and explore more of a different city. And it really doesn't remind me of any place too, which is interesting. I think a lot of these cities in Europe do have similarities, and Amsterdam to me is a standout. Another standout city to me is Copenhagen, and I think that's another reason why I would recommend this city. Copenhagen is what every city should look like, in my opinion. It's clean, it's modern, it's supposed to be the happiest city on earth. It kind of looks like what I think all cities will look like in like 50 years. There's bikes literally everywhere. There's these transport systems that will take you anywhere you need to go. There's great architecture, as I've said. It really is a unique and quite interesting place to go to, and somewhere that I was pretty unfamiliar with before visiting. And so I would say if you are interested in architecture, if you're interested in clean cities, green cities, this would be a place I would recommend for you. Now, some others that I'm going to name are Dublin, Vienna, Prague, Milan, Barcelona, any place in Germany, really. There really are so many more that you can travel to and that are great to travel to. And if you had a favorite that I didn't name, or you want to hear any more on any of these cities, please feel free to tweet me or DM me at GSMC_travel on Twitter. I would love to hear from you. And with that, we are going to take a commercial break. But when we come back, I'm going to share with you some hacks on how to travel on a budget in Europe.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
This is a list that I have developed over a long time and over a lot of trial and error, and something that I will obviously continue to be perfecting and changing and so on and so forth. But I have 10 hacks that work really well for me right now when I am traveling, and so I am going to share those with you. Without further ado, let's get to number 1. My first travel hack is do not be afraid to use supermarkets. This is going to help you tremendously. You can pick up cheese and bread for under like $6 and you could take it to the park with you to eat. You can take it on the go with you anywhere you travel to. Even just committing to eating breakfast at home or in your hostel or Airbnb, or just grabbing the leftovers from your table or a snack you got from a grocery store. Things like this can actually end up saving a lot of money because oftentimes food is what we're spending the majority of our money on when we travel. And so number 2 kind of goes right along with number 1, and that is to be very conscientious when you are booking an Airbnb or a hostel or even a hotel. You really want to make sure that it has access to some kind of kitchen. This is going to give you a lot more opportunities. If you can cook dinner in one night, if you can make breakfast, even if you can make your own coffee, I think that's something that's huge for me, is not buying coffee every day. These little teeny changes are actually going to end up adding up and saving you a lot more money. This can either be a more financially available trip, or you're able to spend more money on dinner or alcohol or whatever you choose to spend it on. And so my third hack is, if you are going to more than one country, so if you're traveling cross-continent, I think that buying a Eurail pass is a really economic and efficient way to travel. So the Eurail is a high-speed train that essentially takes you all over Europe. The passes can be expensive if you're going to use it multiple times. They range from around $200 to $500 US. But according to their website, if you buy the global pass, you can travel to 40,000 destinations in 33 different countries. This, of course, includes France and Germany, Italy and Switzerland. And if you are gonna compare that to, say, flying to all of these places, you really are gonna end up saving a lot of money. Again, I probably wouldn't do this if I was just traveling into one country, or maybe even if I was traveling from just one country to another, I might buy a plane flight. But if you are planning to travel around Europe to go to a different place, this is definitely a resource that I would use in order to save me money in the long run. So, number 4 requires just a bit of a story to explain why I found that this works and why I say to do this in general. So, when I was 17, I traveled to London with a few of my friends. This was the first time I was outside of the country without my parents, and it was so exciting at the time, but we were on a tight budget, like a very tight budget. We quickly realized that it really wasn't going to be possible for us to eat out every meal. I don't do that now. I definitely couldn't do that then. And we pretty much decided that what we would do was allocate our money just to dinner. And this kind of left us all on our own for breakfast and lunch. And what we began to do was, when we were at these very fancy dinner restaurants that we were going to, they would always bring us bread to the table. And we just started to take the loaves of bread, wrap them up, and stick them in our purses. And we would just ask for more and more bread. And this is kind of ridiculous, but we ended up just for the whole entire week eating so much bread, but it was all free, and so it worked well for us. And while this is certainly not the healthiest option and something that I would probably never do now, it really did work for us at the time. And so I think my number 4 way to save money really is just to make sure you grab any leftovers on your table. Grab that extra bread if you can. A lot of times there's like jams and peanut butter. I am a bit of a scavenger in that regard, but it really does end up saving me a lot of money, and it certainly saved me a lot of money when I was 17. So, number 5 is, if you are a student, make sure you bring your student ID. For some reason, in the US, it really is not common to do this, but in many cities in Europe, there are student discounts for almost everything. This includes shopping stores and museums and monuments and sometimes train rides and plane rides. It really is a great bonus to being a student. And so, A, make sure you bring your student discount, and B, make sure you're looking online to see which places accept student discounts and which don't. So, my number 6 rule is plan your trip and book far in advance. And I say this because if you are able to have an outline of where you're going, what you're doing, you're also going to have an outline of your budget. And if you have a budget, it's much easier to kind of allocate your money and to make sure you're spending it in the right way. It's going to help you be less reckless with your money in general. And this really leads into number 7, which is research the things you want to do before you go. And I say this because not only is it just a good idea to plan your trip, but you need to look at a lot of museums and monuments. Some of these places will have free or discounted days. And so if you go to a museum, for example, on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday morning, it's more likely to be discounted or even free, as opposed to if you went on a Sunday morning, if that makes sense. And so number 6 is plan your trip and book in advance. And number 7 is research the things you want to do before you go. And if you can buy tickets, even better. So number 8 is something I've been doing for a long time, and it has helped me quite a bit, and that is walking everywhere. We all know how fast Ubers and taxis can really add up. And if you just kind of make the commitment to walk everywhere, especially when you're in a city you've never been before, this to me is a way to get a lay of the land. This is a way for me to begin to understand a city better, to be able to navigate it better. And walking everywhere, just even if it saves, $5 a day, that's going to add up over the course of a week. And an alternative to this, if you're not able to walk everywhere, or you don't want to, or you don't have the time, is take the time to really learn the public transit system. In every city, of course, there's a public transit, and a lot of times it can be overwhelming if you're in a country you've never been before and a language you don't speak. But if you can kind of slow down and take the time to really understand where you're going and what you're doing in the public transit, it could be a really helpful tool. So, my number 9 hack is, and this might seem simple, but it really is true, and that is to travel with people. Traveling with people is a safer option, it's more fun, but also you really are able to split more things when you travel with people. A lot of times you're able to have, cheaper rooms in a hostel if you have more people, stuff like that. If you're splitting an Airbnb, if you're splitting meal prices, if you want to buy stuff from a supermarket, buying alcohol, anything you can think of, just being able to split that and split that up is going to save you a lot of money. And also, just traveling with people tends to be so much better. I think solo travel is important, and I'd love to talk about that more on another episode. However, traveling with people, I'd say 90% of the time is the way that I prefer to go. Okay. My last hack that I'm going to give you, number 10 before the break, is to bring one backpack. And that might be really hard for some people, but most European airlines always have additional costs for a carry-on bag or for a checked bag, and this is something that no matter how much I travel, I really can't seem to figure out. I always struggle. I always feel like I'm paying more for my luggage, even when I didn't think I would have to. And so if you can just bring one backpack, this is obviously going to save you a lot of money, and it's just efficient. It's easier. You don't have to lug your bags all around the city. And if you want to know more about how to possibly survive a week just with a backpack, listen in after the break, and I'm going to tell you exactly how to pack for 1 week on a trip to Europe.
Always on the go, but the day just won't be one without your Hollywood fix. Let Golden State Media Concepts Entertainment Podcast take care of that. Jordan and Keith is Entertainment Tonight meets Access Hollywood.
I'm Jordan. The guy laughing, that's Keith.
Yeah, I'm Keith. An all-inclusive look of pop culture.
What to pack for a 1 week trip in Europe. You're going to be able to pack all of these things inside of one backpack. And I have to say that these really are my favorite segments to do because I love fashion, but more importantly, I am a sucker for very doable, very easy to wear fashion. And it's something that I have focused on a lot in my travel because it's so important to me to be comfortable when I travel. It's also important to me to look a certain way when I travel. And I think that the way that we present ourselves is important, especially in Europe and European cities in general, because fashion just is more prominent there, especially for men. If you want to be treated a certain way and you want to avoid sticking out as a tourist, which can actually be kind of a safety issue, I really do suggest packing clothing that is sleek and not only efficient, but as I said, also fashionable. If you want to see how I pack my bag, you can check that out on Twitter as well, and I will show you exactly how to pack it in, and so on and so forth. And with that being said, let's begin. So, this can be one of the hardest parts, but you get one pair of shoes. And they better be the most walkable, durable, comfortable shoes that you own because you will be walking. As I mentioned earlier in the episode, that trip to London that I took on a budget, I literally walked 10 miles every single day, and sometimes more, and you don't think that that's possible, but you really could too if you're traveling. It just happens. And so if you bring shoes that are uncomfortable. I promise you won't regret it. Find a pair of shoes that you love. I like to wear a white pair of tennis sneakers, or depending on the trip, my favorite pair of flat leather boots. If you are traveling in the warmer months, maybe you could get away with a second pair of shoes like sandals or flip-flops or flats. But ultimately, you kind of just have to decide what you want to make room for. And so I usually say stick to just the one pair of shoes. Also, you're going to wear them on the plane, and so that's taking all of the room out of your bag. Next, I'm going to walk you through some basic, safe options for clothing. Obviously, this is subject to change based on your own opinions and comfortabilities, but also on weather. And so if you're going when it is super cold outside, you really, really want to be warm. I guarantee that you are not going to want to be underdressed or underprepared when you are walking around a city when it's 10 degrees out. And so I will say, if you're going when it's really cold outside, please wear a big jacket, wear gloves, wear anything you need to, wear it on the plane, which will really help you. And the same thing goes if you're traveling in the middle of the summer. It's just going to be different. You want to be able to pack to be comfortable. But otherwise, I suggest that for all medium weather, you bring a nice peacoat. Peacoats or similar jackets are a great way to elevate an outfit. In fact, lucky for us, you can even pair like sweatpants with peacoats right now. I've actually seen that a lot in fashion, and that's really great because a lot of times I'll throw on a pair of joggers when I am traveling. And so I would get one if you could with a little bit of room in the sleeves, and this is going to allow you to be able to layer as needed. Now, for pants, I suggest one pair of non-ripped dark wash or black jeans. These obviously go with everything, and something that I am always considering when packing is my rewear rate, meaning I can wear and rewear jeans a lot without having to wash them, and this obviously comes in handy when you're traveling. I want to be able to wear something day in, day in. And so dark wash jeans or black jeans are going to be really handy with this. I would also suggest as your second pair of pants to get a pair of slacks. This obviously goes for men and women. I prefer more of a loud print, like a checker or a flower, but that's just my own personal opinion. You can always go neutral. In fact, when in doubt, I say pack all black. You'll notice that that's a trend in a lot of European cities, that a lot of people will wear all black, and this is a way that you can mix and match anything you're wearing, and you're never going to clash. And those are the bottoms that you are going to wear a lot, and so make sure for both your dark wash or black jeans and then your pair of trousers or slacks that they fit great and that you really love them, because you're pretty much going to wear them every day. Next, in terms of tops, is a hack that I randomly fell upon and now wish I had a million of these, and that is a non-wrinkle shirt. Because when I pack, and you'll see it if you see any pictures on Twitter or anything, I roll all of my items, and the non-wrinkle collared shirt is really easy when you're packing and really easy when you're traveling. You can dress them up, you can dress them down, you can wear them with a skirt, a dress, anything. You can put them underneath things, you can put them over things. They're really handy. And so I would definitely pack at least one non-wrinkle shirt. White is always great because it goes with anything. I have a striped one. It's personal preference, of course. Next, I would pack 2 or 3 very basic polos or t-shirts. It can have a logo on it or a graphic if you want, but these will just go with anything that you wear. You don't have to think too much of them. They're really comfortable. You can wear them alone. You could wear them underneath another layer. And this is something, I am someone who likes to express myself very much, and so oftentimes I'll bring, my favorite band t-shirt that looks a little elevated with the black jeans or with trousers. And this is something that can make you feel really comfortable and really normal, which can be important when you're traveling. Next, I would say to pack a neutral sweater. This is great for cold museums, for layering, and for an overall sophisticated look. Try to find one that isn't too bulky when you pack it, and alternatively, if you don't want to wear a sweater, I do have an obsession with suit jackets. These do very similar things. They keep me warm, but I also think that they look really cool, and it's so easy to elevate an outfit by just putting a jacket over it. And so if you're interested in that, you could swap a sweater out for a jacket. And of course, on a trip, especially if you're going to a city, you are going to need something nice. And so when I am looking for my nice outfit to wear, I'm looking for something that I could wear to brunch, I could wear to dinner, I could wear out if I wanted to a party. And something that I have found that I really love is this North Face brand black dress that is made out of athletic material like many North Face items are, and it even has a zipper pocket where you can put your keys and your money, and I am obsessed with this thing, and I pack it with me on pretty much any trip I go to. Unfortunately, of course, I cannot find it anywhere on the North Face website. It apparently doesn't exist anymore, but I would usually pack something like that. I would stay on the classier side, something, again, that you can wear to multiple different things, dress up, dress down, so on and so forth. Other options, if you don't want to dress, you could pack, a nice sweater, a jacket, a blouse, anything that is going to elevate your look more than anything else that you're packing. And lastly, of course, this is optional, as all of these items are, but I really like to bring accessories with me so that I don't get bored of the clothes that I have. For example, a hat, a belt, a watch, and I really like to wear jewelry. And this kind of helps, spice things up for me. It helps me elevate my outfit. It helps me feel like I'm wearing, 7 different outfits instead of realistically, the same 3 outfits over and over again. Also, something that I have learned to do, and I'm still learning to do, I haven't really gotten the perfect plain outfit. Please let me know if you would like me to talk about this, but wear something smart when you're going on a plane. Wear something that is going to fit, perfectly into the items that you've packed. So I would usually wear, either black leggings or an elevated jogger or sweatpants. And I want to wear something that I know will fit into my style. And this is just going to be another thing that you can wear. Again, wear something really comfortable. I love joggers. I love leggings. These I can wear on the plane there. I can wear on public transport, and I can wear on the way home. And so that pretty much is it for my whole packing list of what you should bring in your backpack for 1 week. I swear all of these things, if you can properly fit them, will just fit inside of your backpack with extra room for things to bring home. And if you have any ideas on what you like to bring, I'd love to hear them. And so after the break, I am going to tell you about how to stay safe while you are traveling in a hostel in Europe. And that is after the break.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Travel safe in hostels. I have a real love-hate relationship with hostels in general. Safety is something that I am just willing to spend money on, and that is a personal preference for myself. That is something that I feel very lucky to be able to do, but if you are in a big group of people or you're on a budget, sometimes a hostel really is the best option for you. And if it is, they really can be so fun. I know people who have made extremely close friends that they've met in a hostel, and you can kind of get these incredible, very unique experiences in hostels because you are in a shared place with a bunch of other people who are traveling. And so I'm going to tell you just some safety tactics that you can feel safe too when you're in a hostel. And just to preface this, I really have had some bad experiences in a hostel, like really bad, and it is just part of being a traveler, and it's something that, you know, sometimes just happens. You always have bad travel experiences, but I've also had some amazing ones in hostels, and so I just want everyone to make sure that they are going to be safe. And so here are some ways that I have tried to stay safe in hostels, and hopefully this is a way that you can stay safe in hostels. So here are some guidelines for you. My first and probably most important step when you're finding a hostel is to look up ratings. This, for obvious reasons, is a reliable thing to do. It makes the most sense. And if you look up Hostel World, which is a website that's pretty similar to like Airbnb, essentially, that's a really great resource to find hostels in general, but also to search and make sure you're finding safe ones. Also, hostels that you're interested in, hostels near certain places that you want to go. Again, you can check to see if they have kitchens, you can check to see if they have private rooms, so on and so forth. And so make sure that you are looking up ratings for hostels. I have to say this next one is more for women, but I would recommend staying in a gendered room. So if you're unfamiliar with the setup of hostels, most of them would have male-only rooms, female-only rooms, and then they also have mixed rooms. And for me, as a woman, I just would feel more comfortable sleeping in a room with all women. Again, that is my own personal opinion. It obviously depends person to person. Of course, this is a personal preference. But I think that that is a way that makes me feel just a little bit more comfortable. And so whenever I can, I'm always looking to find a bed in an either an all-women's hostel or an all-women's room in a hostel. And so moving on to the next kind of hack that I have is bring a lock with you to a hostel, or most likely you could buy a lock inside of the hostel. Unless you book a private room, which is unlikely, you will probably be storing your belongings in a locker in a room with a bunch of other people. And so this is obviously just a good idea to keep your belongings safe. It kind of keeps you at ease. You don't have to worry about it too much. And it's just a great way to make sure that your stuff doesn't get stolen, to be honest with you. And so if you can remember to bring a lock, that is great. Sometimes it can be a lot of weight though. And so there almost always is locks for rent, but just make sure that you take that extra precaution. And lastly is a really simple rule that I have, but it's to make some friends in the hostel. If you're traveling alone, find someone else who's traveling alone too. Having someone to kind of watch your back and hang out with in a hostel is both important and also just a lovely experience to have, probably. I think kind of the more people that you know and that know you, you begin to kind of feel safer in your own environment. And as much as you want to be safe, you want to feel safe. And so being able to just, introduce yourself to different people, introduce yourself to the staff, that always makes me feel much better. If I know the front desk person, the security guard, so on and so forth, that is just going to be a hack more to make you feel safe. But that can go a long way as well. Just on that note, talking about safety in general, especially when you're traveling, I think some valuable tips to keep in mind is to attempt to stay in groups when you can. A lot of these are common sense, but I think just the reminder when you are traveling how important it is to, stay in groups, to not go outside by yourself at night, things like these. Another piece of information that a lot of travel websites will tell you is to not draw attention to yourself. So don't have a big map in your hands. Try not to ask strangers for directions. Don't tell anyone where you're staying. It's kind of these common sense things, but in a lot of these situations, you're not really thinking about that. And especially when you are in a new place and you're trying to be kind to people, I think I often get myself into some trouble just with my own openness and friendliness towards people. And so again, I think considering, trying not to walk alone, especially don't walk alone at night, trying not to draw attention to yourself, not asking strangers for directions, which these things can be hard. I mean, if we're traveling, especially by ourselves, there is almost like a need to rely on people that you don't know. But I think it's just important to have your wits about you when you are traveling, and especially if you are traveling in a hostel, like I said. So, not that traveling in a hostel is necessarily a bad idea. I think, as I mentioned before, there are pros and cons, and I think as long as you are really thinking about what you're doing, you're going to be absolutely fine. Okay, that is going to do it for all things traveling to Europe in a week. After the break, I am going to end the show by kind of giving you, as I said, a sneak peek into some of what I did in Belize, and I'm just going to tell you a story. I can't wait. Hang on, and we will be right back.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Left, I want to give you a glimpse into some of my time in Belize. And as I mentioned, I will have a full episode on Belize for our next episode, which I am so excited to do and so excited to talk about. Whenever I come back from a trip, I feel so grateful to be able to have had the experiences that I've had, but also to share my experiences and to be able to talk about it is something that has become so important to me. And so I am looking forward to getting a really full grasp on Belize and talking about the beautiful parts of Belize and the difficult parts of Belize and so on and so forth. But today I wanted to talk to you about a group of people I learned about while in Belize that you might not expect would live there. So I am talking, of course, about the Mennonites. And the Mennonites are a group of Christian people who essentially are Anabaptist. They ended up, although they originally were living in kind of the Switzerland area, were seeking some more religious freedom. They could be kind of compared to the Amish in terms of some of their ideals. And so they were seeking religious freedom, so they left the Netherlands and essentially from there decided to move about to a bunch of different places, and the last place that they ended up was Canada. And then around the 1950s and the 1960s, they actually began to migrate to Belize. And they migrated to Belize because they made a deal, actually, with the Belizean government that they would not be taxed. And in return, they would use their farming technology that they had. And today, they actually have almost an entire monopoly on many farming things. They provide a lot of dairy, a lot of grain, a lot of everything to Belize in general. And in the 1950s and 60s, when they moved to Belize, they started with jungle, with rainforest. And they now live on a place called Spanish Lookout. That's one of the biggest offsets. Of course, they're all around Belize, but Spanish Lookout is where they first moved to, and it now honestly looks like its own country. And so if you've ever been to Belize, it is a developing country, and there are so many beautiful parts of Belize, and there are also a lot of impoverished parts of Belize, and it is very interesting to be traveling around those places and then to cross over to Spanish Lookout, where there are paved roads and huge shopping centers, like comparable to Walmart, and ATVs and dump trucks and tractors, and it honestly looks like you're stepping into, North or South Carolina. And this was a bit of a shock to me when I first saw it, and when I realized why there's so much wealth is essentially because the Mennonites have been able to very tightly knit, keep their wealth within their group, because they pretty much only marry within the Mennonite community. And so, obviously, this was something that I was not expecting whatsoever, and additionally, they are originally from Switzerland and have pretty much kept within their own community and culture. And so while the majority of Belize is Hispanic and African and many different cultural groups, Mennonites have blonde hair and very light skin, and it's just a very interesting thing to witness in general. And I was so lucky to be able to talk to a Mennonite woman, and her name was Tina, and she was such a lovely woman, and we learned a lot about the Mennonite community from her. And a issue that is going on in the Mennonite community is, as is happening in many parts of Belize, is there's a lot of teen pregnancy, a lot of sexual assault, so on and so forth. Something that was very striking is the way that the Mennonites dress. The best way that I could describe it would be if you were to walk back 100 years in time. All of the women make their own clothes for the most part, and so they kind of have this coined, quote, old-fashioned clothing. So women traditionally wear long dresses with an apron and a bonnet over their head, and a lot of the men will wear these black slacks or overalled and checkered shirts and hats, and it's quite an interesting sight to see, and a really big reminder that cultures are just different. And it was so interesting to kind of see how one part of Belize was, and then entirely its own bubble almost this Mennonite Spanish Lookout culture was. And although they do have a lot of older tendencies, like I said, it's kind of like walking back 100 years in time, they also are very progressive in Belize in terms of technology and farming and even some forms of government and so on and so forth. And so they have this really fascinating, really interesting juxtaposed way about them. And of course, as we know, with a lot of traditional cultures and traditional ideologies, unfortunately, as in many places in Belize, comes with a lot of gender discrimination and gender inequality, and that is something that we learned a lot about in the Mennonite culture, and that is certainly something that I will get to in next week's episode. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the Mennonites and who they are, and that is going to wrap up our show. Please stay tuned for our next episode, where I will be talking a lot more about Belize. I will be explaining a lot about what I did on my trip in terms of women's health and spirituality, and just giving you some general facts about Belize and why you should travel there. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Travel Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask you to please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. It really helps. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type in GSMC to find all of our shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From travel to health and wellness to entertainment and life and happiness to sex and relationships. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's episode of the Golden State Media Concepts Travel Podcast.